Welcome to the Truth Hoops podcast with myself, Max, and Shane.
Yes, sir.
And we are here to give you the truth about basketball. There's so many basketball lies out there.
Yeah, everybody's just lying. Bunch of liars out there.
We're talking about the truth and only the truth.
Yep.
Well, actually, with that, I got a little story time. I like to open up with a little story. It'll be quick and short. When I was growing up, about sixth grade, that was when the two ball dribbling craze first.
Oh,
remember that was.
I was so trash at two ball, dude. I still am really bad at it.
It was a craze though. It was like, I'm not even sure if people can understand it because I haven't seen anything since it.
No.
It really was a fad in the way a dance was a fad, or like, how
Yep.
the whip and the nay nay, or whether it was crank it Soldier Boy, to even like the jerk came back and all these dance moves. The two ball dribbling had its own little moment in the sun, more so than any other basketball thing I can even remember. And I was at a youth basketball team, and we did two ball dribbling till we were blue in the face, and I could do all the two ball stuff. And I remember that was like, somehow if you were elite ball handler, you could do it.
Right.
Like bounce low, one high, one low, and between the legs. And I would just turn the rock over left and right if I was in an actual game.
Yeah.
I could.
It when they would do the crossovers, like one would switch hands, the other one would go through the legs, and then one would. I was so bad at that. I went to a camp, like you're talking about. I went to a camp when I was young, and it was a 2-hour camp. At least an hour of it was all two ball, up and down the floor. And I was like, dude, Dad, I am trash at ball handling, apparently. But little did I know that that's not all that there is with ball handling. But yeah, you're right. There was a stretch. I don't know how long it was. It was like, I was probably in high school, so it was probably like 4 or 5 years of just two ball handling was like the main thing when it came to work on your handles.
I'm going to put that out to the audience because I didn't think about that before this podcast. I don't think outside of, like, maybe remember the jump soles that you would wear?
Oh my gosh.
I don't think
you're talking about the shoes with the horseshoe thing at the tip of the foot.
Yes.
Oh, I saw somebody had those. I'd never seen them before, and I saw somebody had those. I was like, "What are they? Look like space shoes." And I was like, "This has to be so bad for so many reasons." I don't know. Maybe they work. I have no idea.
There are some studies out there that suggest an elevated heel might be of some use. But the point is,
wow,
to our audience, I don't think there's been a craze like two ball dribbling. Maybe a Mikan drill might be up there with, but that's not really a craze as much as it's an embedded foundation. There hasn't been something so radically new that captivated the audience. So just let us know if you find anything, because I want to ask you basketball heads out there if I'm missing something on that. But with that in mind, I want to get to that because I did the two ball handling. I sucked at dribbling in a game. I could do all the cool stuff. So you're a skills coach, obviously. If I were to say a young Max coming in, and I said, Shane, I want to get better at ball handling. But first, before I get better at ball handling, what is ball handling? How would you actually describe that to someone?
I would describe it more of being able to match your movements with the ball. So being able to move your body up and down the floor with the ball. Now, that doesn't mean all your ball handling drills have to be you moving up and down. I think there's a lot of good stationary drills you can do. But to me, the best ball handlers have the best footwork, and then their timing of their dribble matches with their footwork. So there's something we call in basketball, in the training world, your dribble step timing. So if I was dribbling with my right hand going to the right, I would match that dribble when it hits the floor as best as I can with my left foot or my opposite foot. So rarely, outside of some situations, would I dribble with the same side foot, right? And I'm definitely not going to take dribbles on both steps. So a lot of what I do is dribble timing. And if I can get correct dribble timing, then I can get to stops. I can get to change the directions. I can get to pull-ups. I can really do anything off the bat. I can get to different finishes. So a big part of being a good ball handler to me has a lot of foot control tied to it and has very good dribble timing connected. And then along with just, basic ball control of being able to maneuver the ball around our body. I think that's also an important thing as well.
Okay. So what is the purpose of ball handling? If I were to ask you, your quick synopsis to some alien that landed and they're watching the game and they're, tell me the quick purpose of ball handling. What would
I
you say the
I
purpose is?
I think to me, it's just freedom to get to places on the floor that you would want to, whether that's, running something or attacking or evading, really any movement. I think it's just freedom to be able to do those things with a defender on us. Typically with the defender on us. There are situations where there's nobody on our hips or in front of us and we have to do some sort of ball handling aspect. But to me, being a good ball handler gives you freedom. And it's something that even me as a player was not a great ball handler, right? And then, in some situations I was better, right? If somebody's on my hip, or somebody on my back, or if I'm coming off a pin down and I got to put the ball down, I was great in those situations. I think face-to-face ball handling, that aspect was probably a little bit more difficult for me. So to me, being a good ball handler, it gives you freedom.
So I'll ask myself the question
Yeah.
because I'll attack it from I think of ball handling, if I was just to break it down the best I could, would be two areas. One is ball security. Can I
Yep.
not have the ball physically taken away from me and get
Right.
to a certain point on the court with that ball? But the purpose of getting to that point on the court has nothing to do with openness. It's merely, can I get to a spot? So someone like Jokic would be considered a high ball security dribbler. He's not dribbling the ball. And as a big man, you say, don't dribble it. He dribbles it a lot. It doesn't get stolen. He's not doing the second thing, which I want to say, which is a space creator or an openness creator, which is someone like Kyrie, Allen Iverson, these classic ball, great Jason Williams, J. Will, the original elbow pass. These guys are great space creators with the ball, while they arguably are not, at least their highlights, you can go watch the game, they're not like the Nikola Jokic per se, where he's just ball security at the highest degree as a big man.
Sure.
Because again, if you look at just relative, before anyone hops on my back and says, hey, Max, you're saying Jokic is somehow a better ball handler than Kyrie. The point of that statement is relative to his peers, he's an excellent ball security guy. Not saying he's comparative to Kyrie, but he doesn't dribble the ball with his foot like some big men do. He's able to navigate. So how do you answer that? Are there two areas?
I think that's important. Yeah, I think that's super important because you look at positional wise, like imagine like JJ Redick. For him to be a good ball handler in his position, he's not being asked to do much with the ball when it comes to actually putting the ball on the floor. But it comes to more of your point where it's like ball security, right? So if I think about JJ Redick, he was so good at coming off a pin down and literally just tossing the ball with his inside hand or outside hand into like this empty pocket of space to be able to get those mid-range shots up. So to me, that's a huge ball handling aspect, is being able to get yourself even a little bit more open or create more space. JJ's way of doing that is a little bit different than Kyrie, right? So yeah, I think that is a super important thing to think about, is like positionally wise, what does it mean to be a good ball handler for you in your position?
I think most kids make the mistake of obsessive space creation with ball handling.
For sure.
That's my immediate takeaway with the old man and watching social media is that there's overemphasis on space.
A lot of drag stops and snatches and that stuff. Yep.
And in reality, I think the toughest thing about ball handling is being able to control the ball while physically being contacted. Yeah. And when it's not necessarily in space, you could argue sprinting and changing pace is difficult.
Yep.
But in reality, if you're in a dead sprint and the defender's in a dead sprint, you could more times than not keep it in one hand and make one change of direction move and be A-okay. You don't need to do the crazy stuff you might see Darius Garland do, where he's like dead sprint and make three left to right moves. But when it comes to younger kids, it seems like anytime they get physical with a movement, they lose the ball. And so how would I train to work on that if I'm a younger athlete?
You know what? I have this drill that we've been doing more recently, especially, and it's basically engaging your offhand. So like imagine I'm doing ball handling. Let's say I was even getting to like a dribble stop, like an under drag that would go underneath my leg. With nobody guarding me, my offhand can prepare for the ball to just, I can receive the ball from my right hand to my left hand very easily. But in a game, like I'm like almost like pushing off like a chicken wing, right, with my defender. So this left hand is nowhere close to near where the ball needs to be received. So we've been doing this offhand, like it's kind of like a tap drill, right? We'll have some sort of accountability to like a chair or a cone or something, where we cross the ball over, and then we have to give anywhere from 1 to 3 taps on a chair, and then we're able to exchange immediately after. So basically, what we're trying to do is engage the offhand, have the offhand be doing something different than the ball hand, right? Typically, the ball hand is like letting the ball float in that situation. So that's one thing that we do. We do a lot of chair touches, to be honest, is like, get to a dribble stop. And when we're stopped in a low position, our offhand is touching that chair, and then we pull the ball back, and then it's able to receive the ball. Just, I guess, trying to get that ball or that offhand, I guess, active before just kind of sitting there and waiting for the ball to happen, like a 1-on-0 situation.
Is the offhand receiving the ball? Is the offhand doing like a hand play where you're warding off the defense?
It could do both. I think the offhand in those situations is probably about to receive the ball. So we're having that offhand be busy while the ball is ready to go underneath our leg. The offhand is still busy, and then basically at that last second is when that offhand is able to remove itself from the chair or from whatever tool we're using to receive it. So instead of just having hand to hand right next to each other, we kind of get that one active. I think that's one way, but again, just your ability to let the ball float and then go quick. That alone, that skill alone, be able to go slow.
What does that mean? What's a float? Quick. Describe that in
so
more
like,
succinct terms.
Yeah. So like, imagine like a sequence could be like let's say I'm standing in a stationary position and I'm going cross between behind. Maybe that's my flow, cross between behind, continuous. I would say, okay, we're going to go cross, and then I'm going to put a chair in front of you, and you're going to tap that chair 3 times. And then after you tap 3 times, you're allowed to go between behind. Those between the behind are going to be very quick. And then immediately when you go across again, it's slow. And then it's those 3 taps, and then it's between behind. So we're changing the pace of how we're dribbling. And then we're also changing the height, because in order for me to let that ball come out, and in order for me to tap the chair long enough, I'm going to have to let the ball float. I don't have a choice. So the ball is going to hit the floor. I'm going to carry it, something like that. So being able to, I guess, let the ball float in your hand and almost spin in my hand, right, and be engaged with the defender and then go into another dribble, I think is a pretty underrated skill when it comes to handle stuff. Something that you can do in a stationary setting. Obviously, I think that helps, but it's not it's not going to be the exact same feeling as if somebody's actually pushing on you, right? And you're trying to go somewhere, and you're also trying to read the floor. So
if you had to, then in the perfect of worlds where you don't have a stationary, you have more than, I guess, a stationary setting, how would you train that physicality part?
Oh man. There's a drill that we do. So basically imagine me standing underneath the hoop, and I have a offensive player at the top of the key, and maybe I give them a restricted area that they're allowed to play in, right? Like a box or some sort of lines. And then I have their defender on them, applying as much ball pressure as possible without completely hacking the player. They can just go at them. And I basically tell the ball handler, like, hey, it's going to be 3 to 5 seconds. And then I'm going to be underneath the hoop, pointing either left or right. And that's the side of the hoop that I need you to score on. So now the ball handler has to keep the handle going. He can play in a little bit of space. He's dealing with contact, but he also has to kind of keep your eyes up and read the floor, because as soon as I point, that's the side of the hoop I need you to score on. Now, the other aspect with that is, let's say I point to the right side of the rim, and he's like, okay, I got to finish on the right side. That doesn't mean that you just go to the right side immediately. Maybe you set them up. Maybe I float to the left, maybe a heart attack left, and then I can spin back to the right. Because the defense doesn't know. His back is turned to me. He has no idea if I'm pointing left or right. He doesn't even know when. So that's like a nice little ball pressure drill that I like is have a coach sit underneath the hoop, have the offensive player deal with that ball pressure for 3 to 5 seconds, give them an angle, and see if they can, one, handle the pressure, but then also set up their angles in order to score on that side of the rim.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. One of the things I noticed when I played AJ 1-on-1, for those listening, AJ Green with the Bucks, is how physical of a ball handler he is. A lot of like the PNR pick and roll setup stuff,
using his body.
You have to really put your shoulder and hip in a position to ward off the defense.
Yeah.
And using the defense's reaction to that to create your next option.
Sure.
So do you think a lot of kids often?
Oh man.
Just
I feel like there's a bad stigma with the old, like they call it like the old man dribble, where you kind of like just stick your foot in there and then you put the ball on your back hip and you keep your head over your shoulder. I feel like there's something, kids don't like that because like the drill that I explained to you, typically the first handful of kids before we call timeout, they're all going to over dribble, right? And they just start dribbling immediately. So if I say, okay, drill's live, every single kid will put the ball on the floor. Nobody's going to stand there and triple threat and just pivot first. Nobody's going to do any of that. Nobody's going to, they're over dribble and they'll do too many exchanges hand to hand. So when you talking about AJ, that obviously it sounds like he's able to be a little bit more physical and probably has learned to like, hey, I don't have to dribble so much, and I can actually keep this simple. So in for me too, like if I think about somebody's pressuring me knowing that my hand-to-hand exchanges and my shiftiness isn't crazy, I'm probably going to be like, using my body more in that situation.
it's interesting because Jordan Delp, who he works with, I go to their skills, and like when they're doing the ball screen work, how physical that initial exchange at the ball screen is, that emphasis is placed.
Sure.
And then off of that is where you kind of move. So when I talked to Age about it, it was like the idea of this asymmetry principle. And essentially what you're trying to do is for every inch you move, you want the defender to move 3. You want an asymmetry.
Sure.
And with our physical abilities, the more athletic we are, the smaller of an asymmetry you can operate with. Like Ja Morant can probably operate at even. He takes one step, you take one step. Yeah, if you're even, he's leaving. He's that much faster than you. So if you think about the difference between how much the defender moves relative to the offensive player, that difference is essentially the window. So if I get the defender to move 3 inches and I move 1 inch, I have a 2-inch window to operate. Now I have space and leverage.
Sure.
And I think a lot of athletes think of ball handling and space creating in terms of how much can I move, not in relative terms of how much can I make the defense move. And when you think about how much you can make the defense move, no longer is it just about a ball handling move, but it's also a positional. So a bump, like Luka Doncic, creates absurd amounts of asymmetry with a bump. He'll hit you and you're off 4, 5, 6 inches. And too often people think, oh, it's only like the Luka Doncic, sorry, not Luka, I mean Allen Iverson crazy crossover, or something like Kyrie does. And that's great, but at the same time, those guys are stupid quick. And so if they can even get you to match 1-to-1, and you think as a defender, odds are they're not as quick as Kyrie. And so they're thinking, I'm going to overcommit, or I have to move to my point fast because he's getting to A to B so quick. If I don't get to B, he's going to be by me.
Right.
And so they're creating leverage in the same way a shooter creates leverage when someone closes out way too aggressive on you because you're a shooter. And I've always wondered if we could start to break down and like deconstruct ball handling from an actual analytical model. Because I get so frustrated at times when I hear announcers or I see whatever happening, and people always kind of bucket ball handling as this nebulous concept, like, oh, we're going to dribble around. But then you watch guys succeed, and they succeed and create space in so many different ways that there's these subcategories of space creation. And I think they're kind of dictated by like that asymmetry I mentioned and your physical ability to use that asymmetry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So I've always wondered if we could, as sports scientists / skills coaches, kind of sit down and begin to map out what makes those things possible. Because I don't think the same handling move that works for, Kyrie makes any sense for Steph Curry.
Right.
Because if you watch all of Steph Curry's handling, it's a constant search for a shot pocket. It looks sloppy. The ball's kind of like being thrown everywhere.
Right. And his feet are always tapping in different areas.
It's like it's like the worst ball handler ever. And basically he's kind of just throwing it, and you are so afraid of his shot that no one's daring to reach. And he actually dribbles it
tight like that,
pretty high. Like the ball's pretty high because he can just at any moment just grab it and shoot it.
Right.
Versus someone like Kyrie is such a low dribbler, low gather, low to high gather. But his fear is his ability, his ridiculous finishing ability. And so if it looks at getting an athlete better, I think it's really important to understand how they create leverage. Like
Right.
what is their biggest weapon to create that advantage? Some guys might be physical mass, like you've played in the old man leagues against the dude who's too wide to get around. And
Right.
he's like, you can't steal the ball from him because he's gigantic. In one hip check, you're flying like 4 feet off.
Right.
And so I've always
I
wondered if you've ever considered, or
yeah.
I've wondered
Yeah,
about that. I wonder if you've ever considered something like
for
that.
sure. For sure. And I think there are some movements that we work on. And one thing that we like to like pair a dribble bump with is kind of like a hip rotation. So after I bump somebody, I'm rotating my body and my shoulders to be able to go to cross and to shoot. Basically just kind of falling into like a drop stance, right? Or a split stance. So I have that kind of that ball in the pocket. Now I'm a threat to go either direction. So yeah, man, I think you know, ball handling as a whole, there's probably not a big enough focus on I guess for lack of better terms, keeping things simple, right? Or just creating those angles with your actual body, right? And like you said, give an inch to get, you know, to get 2 inches, right? Or give an inch, make them move 3 inches. Now you have that window. I don't think that's talked about. It's not even something that I'm probably talking about enough either when it comes to handles.
It's interesting from an evaluation standpoint. I've always pretend to be an assistant GM and I sit there and I wonder how people evaluate stuff. Because if you
Sure.
watch someone dribble and you're like, oh, is this person a good ball handler? How do you actually define that?
Right.
What is a good? Because people just go straight to the highlights and they'll say, oh, look at this guy put a shifty move on. Oh, he's got a crazy bag. And then you look at him heated up one time under pressure and turns the ball over, or he gets
Right.
physical.
There's got to be some sort of efficiency tied to it, right? Like how easy do you get to your spots and how effective are you when you actually get to the spots that you're trying to get to? It's hard to measure the space created though. You know what I mean? And like you're saying, like having a bunch of moves is awesome, but being able to get to your spots and actually be effective is better. So like me, I could easily be looked at as a very bad ball handler if somebody's like, here's a bunch of pressure, handle the ball with a live dribble on the floor, Shane. I need you to do these things. But if somebody just pitched me a pass, I'm not going to put the ball on the floor. I'm probably going to sell my shot. And then after I get an angle, right, then I'm going to jab and go. Now, when I drive downhill, I'm probably a much better ball handler than I am face to face, kind of like we talked about before. Now I'm good at like dribbling into somebody and holding and tapping it low, right? Or bouncing out or stepping back. To me, that's where I'm probably more comfortable. So I would grade myself probably in that situation. But again, like you're saying, we evaluate players. There's GMs talking about who's a good ball handler. And it's like, what does that even mean? How do you
So
grade that?
is Luka Doncic a great ball handler?
Yeah, if the first answer for everybody is like Kyrie's the best ball handler, but like, which is true, he's a great ball handler, but like Luka doesn't move like Kyrie, so why would he dribble like Kyrie?
Kyrie's the most spectacular ball handler.
Sure.
Like
Well,
he
and Curry
does.
moves different than all of them, like you just said. So how do you grade? I think it has to have a lot to do with your body type and position and what's being asked of your, I guess, your role.
Yeah, and that's when you start to look at players on my end, and someone comes to me and is like, I want to work on, X, Y, and Z. And they great debate to give an example of this. I'm gonna take a step back into like Division 3 world. Is in Division 3 basketball, your big men are never actually that big height wise,
Right.
and they're never actually that athletic. And so you can
Right.
have two options. If you look at it too, the best big, and this is a little bit off topic, but I promise you we'll round this out here. You can either try your best to make this big man more athletic, or you can simply have this big man eat a lot of food and become 40 pounds heavier and probably be much more difficult to deal with than
Right.
however more athletic he could have ever gotten. And I firmly believe that because at that level, no one's that athletic. So athleticism isn't a huge issue. And so physicality becomes a big thing. You look at someone like Kenny Lofton Jr. as a hyper extreme example of this. People talk about, oh, is he athletic enough? Whatever. Yeah, he doesn't. Athleticism isn't just how high you jump. His ability to move at his physical size is astounding, and he's able to just leverage people out of the way. And so,
Right.
as a ball handler, if someone comes up to me that, hey, I want to do some training to become a better ball handler, what's the physical aspects I need to do? Well, you got to understand how that person actually handles the ball. Is that
Right.
someone who has to leverage their body a lot? Because maybe getting stronger and having more physical mass in them would actually really help. And so
Sure.
these guys who are caught kind of in the middle ground are the guys who are in a pickle. Because you look at someone like Drew Holiday, great ball handler, but physically so strong.
Oh yeah.
He's like a
Really hits
rock.
people.
And so you don't take the ball away from him because he turns his shoulder and you run into that and you're not
Yeah.
getting through it. And Ja Morant is a good ball handler, but they're very different in how they handle the ball because Ja Morant's ball handling skills, and same with Russell Westbrook in his prime, you're afraid he's going to run right by you. So you don't even bother to heat him up. You just like, all right, I'm not going to get too close because you're just going to run by me. And so is he a good ball handler? Well, I think so because he's successfully doing what he's trying to do. But unless you actually look at the goal of it as a whole, it's hard to determine whether or not someone actually, like, what's the definition? We don't define it. We don't have any way to actually begin to measure it.
Well, I think the eye test for a lot of people is seeing the ball move hand to hand in a fast way, right? Like cross between behind, right? If somebody did that in a game and somebody fell for it, instantly our first thought is like, wow, he's got a nice handle. But what we're talking about is, and more importantly than that, is how can you tie other aspects to it according to your size, position, role, everything like that. How well can you execute that with the ball handling, I think is probably more important.
Because I've seen guys who can do all the cones they want, cross, tween, and just get ripped in games.
Mm-hmm.
They just are too open. They don't know how to guard the ball. I know guys who can't do cross between the legs, and you can't steal the ball from them.
Well, the other thing too is like I think some of the best ball handlers have another skill that makes them very lethal. Like I think about Kyrie, his ability to stop and hit a pull up like fading away, and then to be able to go downhill and then slam the brakes and change angles really quickly. That automatically is like very. If somebody's just going to dribble in front of me, I'd be like, go ahead, right? And if they pose no threat to go by me or to slam the brakes, I'm like, yeah, please try to go to the rim. We'll see what happens, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But with Kyrie, it's like I don't know what he might shoot a three. He might drive me downhill and get all to the rim. He might slam the brakes. I have no idea. So there's a lot of like unpredictable like things going on there. Same thing with Luka, just different ways. And then same thing with Curry, like kind of how you talked about. His ability to shoot makes him a good ball handler. If Curry couldn't shoot, he'd probably be a really bad ball handler. It'd probably be a lot easier to get up into him and make him flustered, and all those high dribbles would be even worse.
Oh, so we've entered a great question now.
There we go.
I'm really happy I got here. Does ball handling even exist? Is it something that exists in isolation? I would actually argue ball handling does not exist in isolation. It doesn't exist.
It needs something else to go with it in order to exist.
Yeah, it's like saying what's fast. And fast doesn't really exist. Like you could run the court fast if you can't dribble the ball really well and you can't run as fast with the ball.
That's gotta be the title.
Fast?
That's gotta be the title of the video right there.
This ball handling
doesn't exist.
And I don't think it exists. I don't.
So if you don't think that, right? If that's kind of what you're thinking, what would you do to work on it, or would you try to develop those other skills, and then maybe that goes along with it?
I don't think ball handling exists in isolation. It's what we call an emergent quality. It exists because you're doing something, but by itself, it doesn't exist. And the great example at the beginning was the 2-ball dribbling. I can do 2-ball dribbling. And wow, I'm actually a great ball. I suck at ball handling. I get ripped all the time. And because I thought that's what dribbling was. And in reality, dribbling is a tool, like you said at the beginning, to get to space.
Yeah.
And there's tool to get to space for openness to score and tool to get to space for security. You're just going to operate yourself over there so you can set a play up. And ball handling itself is merely a means to fit who you are and what you are.
Sure.
So if I can shoot really well, my threat of a handle exists because I shoot really well.
Right.
If I can't shoot or pass and I can just dribble the ball, I will never see the basketball court. I'm like this like non-existent entity, assuming I can't pass at all. And I don't think ball handling by itself can ever be quantified. You can never point to someone and say they're a good ball handler. Because I dare anyone to look at any person across the board who doesn't shoot, pass, and all they do is initiate an offense and call them a good ball handler.
Right.
And even then, you're leveraging your speed, your quickness. Someone's ball handling is good because of something else that exists with it.
Right. I
So
agree. And I think about Jokic too. Like you were talking about his, I don't know if it's court awareness, vision. I don't know how you'd categorize that piece to it, but that to me makes him that type of good ball handler. And I think passing has a lot to do, goes into ball handling a little bit. Being able to move the ball from one side of your body to another, throw it behind your head, have enough touch of the release of your fingers to hit him in the spot. So yeah, but if you put Jokic in some handle drills and tell him to go low, and the typical answer would be like, no, he's trash at ball handling. But according to his position, he's great. Never doesn't turn the ball over when he dribbles too much, right? Has great passing, all that stuff.
So I think that at the end of the story, at the end of the day, we can conclude that ball handling in isolation isn't real.
It's not even real.
It doesn't exist. I think maybe you could say there's like a limiting factor. Like obviously you can't dribble the ball off your foot. Like there's like some limiting ability. Can you actually dribble the basketball? But there's some argument that like Magic Johnson didn't ever get it out of his right hand.
Dude, I watched Magic highlights. I tweeted this. I actually tweeted his highlights because there's such an emphasis on being able to dribble with your left hand, which I somewhat understand, and finish with your left hand. But I just think I think about like left hand floaters. Why would you ever shoot a lefty floater? Why would you? And the kids toss those up, and I'm like, what? If you shoot a lefty floater, you're not open. I don't know what to tell you. There's got to be a better option than a left-handed floater. And if you can use your dominant hand for a high when we're competing, right? If I can have a high percentage of making it with my dominant hand, why would I not? Why wouldn't I?
That I love that. And we can say, I want to say that for a different topic because I have a huge opinion on that. That we shouldn't do that. But talking about the ball handling, he doesn't ever go left. Right. Or James Harden only goes left. So is James Harden a bad ball handler because he doesn't go right? No. Does Luka Doncic ever step back going right? I don't think I've ever seen him going right, take a step back.
Step back with his left foot.
He snatch backs going right, and he step backs going left. Yep. There's never a step back going right. And so when
he can't be stopped. Everybody probably knows that. It's probably on every scouting report. But what are you going to do? Same with James Harden. Don't let him go left. It's like, well, what are you going to do?
And so Luka does one move, step back left. He's open every time. So how is his handle getting him open? Yeah. No, it's the existence of these other things. His handle allows us
to do other things. Yeah.
And so it's so we've made up this lie that like as coaches and people have been to the system that ball handling is this thing that somehow exists like in the way that a good shot can exist. Because I do believe there are some times in isolation, a good shot, someone who can shoot the ball can shoot the ball. Ball handling is one of those weird things that it's so variable based on who you are and what you do. It'd be the equivalent to saying someone's a good scorer. And you're like, well, does that mean JJ Redick's not a good scorer in the NBA because he didn't shoot runners? The guy, you can't leave him open. Or Kyle Korver wasn't a good scorer. Like it's this nebulous term that has no definition, which is why at the beginning I was trying to pry out some definition. Like, how do we think about this? Is it we're creating space to get a jump shot? Is it whatever? And at the end of the day, I don't think we can answer it by any single definition. And if it has no definition, then it doesn't exist.
Right. I agree. I love it.
All right, we'll take a break. We have some questions from our listeners. If you guys have questions for us, please let us know. By the way, feel free to shoot us messages. We'll put questions out in the IG stories and whatnot. So we'll take a break and we'll go to some questions here right after. All right, we got one. I'll ask the first one here.
Yeah.
From Milwaukee Bucks shooting guard. A Green, avid listener of the podcast, friend of the show.
Our most famous listener.
That we know of.
Yep, that we know of.
Maybe Drake's listening out there. Sorry, Age. Would you rather be highly skilled with hardly any physical abilities or super athletic with basically no skills?
Oh my God.
I'll answer this first.
Go ahead.
I'll give you time to think about this. Shane didn't know this question ahead of time. I saw it earlier. Looking back on it, because I've spent a career of being unathletic, I think I just want to be athletic. Like one time in my life. I don't really care the end result of basketball.
You just want stupid hops.
I would love to go play open gym and just dunk on people.
Right.
Is it that much to ask for?
Oh
I've
man.
made so many threes in I just
You
played
might
pickup.
you might mess around and get to the league off of that, Max.
I went and played pickup the other day and I made a lot of threes. And it just brought me not much joy at all. But if
Yeah.
I had one dunk, the electricity through my veins would have been palpable. People would have
Dude.
seen it. So I'm gonna pick for the sake of my own
Just entertainment. Just to be
my
just
own
to get hype in a
deficiencies.
game.
I want to be super athletic. I would love, by the way, to not look athletic either. I don't want to look. I want to be super athletic,
Just
not look
scrawny
athletic at all.
legs. Yeah.
And I want to show up in like a Star Wars shirt and like jeans.
Dude,
Like,
you have some of those shirts. You could just go right to the dresser right now and pull some shirts out.
I could, but I am 6'2", 220, unfortunately. I'm gonna be like, soaking wet 170 and like jeans with holes and mush basketballs in the
What a tough question. I don't know. I think if I was tall, I'd pick what you picked. Right? Like if I was going to be a center, we talked about this before too. Like NBA centers, what should their offseason look like? Well, just stay healthy, get more athletic, shoot free throws and hook shots and touch shots, and then go on home. So if I was tall, I'm going with that one. I'm just going to be dumb, bouncy, all this stuff. Man, even if I was short though, imagine you're short and you're like 5'8" and you're just like dunking over people. You'd be famous instantly. I don't know, man. That's tough. That's tough.
you gotta answer it.
For a playing career with no athletic ability, I know you could play with either one. I'm picking skill. I'm just gonna pick skill. I'm picking skill. It's more fun to play with skill. If I could dribble more.
This is such a boring answer. The strength coach picks athleticism, and the skills coach picks skills. Surprising.
That's hard though. That's hard. I don't know.
I wish if I could pass the ball better. I played against this guy
pass better
at Iowa State in pickup, and he was unathletic as unathletic gets. They didn't really have a handle, but would just throw dimes all day. It was so quirky in his game. Yeah. It was like really syncopated and awkward, but would just drop dimes. And I watched that and I was like, wow, that's actually a pretty cool career path to pick.
That looks fun. Yeah.
I would do that.
Well, I got some good ones. It's hard to pick, depending on how much time we have. I want to get your opinion on like 3 of these, to be honest. This person's basically asking, do camps make you better or just learn more? So I want to kind of pick your brain, because I've done a ton of skill camps and this is kind of even for my knowledge too, but I mean, there might be a bunch of coaches and this is probably good for kids too. What is your viewpoint on camps? Like a 1-day, 2-hour camp? What should be the mindset of the kid, the parent, or even what should me or another coach be trying to actually accomplish in that session?
There's 2 levels to that, because
Max has not seen this. Has not
seen this. There's a business aspect to it,
sure,
which is unfortunate because no one wants to go to a camp and play rotate defense for a day, or no one wants to go to. They want to do a camp that's fun.
Exactly,
and so
that's a huge piece.
And that's just part of it. That's the nature of the beast. That's the cost of doing business. If it's a perfect world, as a camper, you would go somewhere because you're seeking out information that you lack. I want to be exposed to Shane because Shane's hosting a live action drill. I don't have a coach who teaches 3-on-3 here. I am a coach and want to learn. I'm a player who wants to learn and take us back, my friends. With that in mind, maybe I'll go with a couple of my friends so they too can learn with me. Sure. I'm going to go and I'm going to try and get into all the drills I can. I'm going to take mental notes. I don't care about impressing anyone. And that's a big thing. Too many people try to impress people at a camp. You're not going to get a scholarship at a camp led by a trainer. Go there, learn as much as you can, ask questions that are tough. Like, what are variations and what can I do with one person? Ask selfish questions, not questions that benefit the camp. You paid for it. Ask for it.
I love this answer.
Those are some big things I would really consider. If you are a parent taking a kid to a camp, fun, especially when a foster basketball, if it's a young athlete and they're not like say a 15-year-old who's really trying to take the next steps and understand, a professional athlete maybe who's trying to go learn from somebody, you're trying to foster enjoyment, go somewhere where they have fun. They have basketball games they play basketball tag, they have people that laugh and enjoy it, not yell at them, and they don't want
Right.
to feel pressure to try and succeed, but instead find ways that they can enjoy the game in different paths. And so that's the parent perspective. The
Yep.
player perspective would be the information, knowledge,
Exposure. Yep.
and the coach or the trainer who's running it is know why you're putting the camp on, because you don't want to do a little bit of everything because you do a lot of nothing. You want to make sure that if this is for fun and enjoyment, we're going to do that. It's very clearly for that reason. And if it's not for fun and enjoyment, it's very purposeful. It's very clear that it's for that reason. And there's not a miss signals or communications or messages between people who show up and maybe you're expecting one thing or the other.
Something else. Yeah.
And that's my biggest kind of talking point.
God, I love that answer. And I think that's, as somebody that puts on a lot of camps, there's always a struggle too, because you never know. A lot of these kids are from small town kids or from small towns, and they don't get exposure to this. So my first instinct, and it always has been, and hearing you say that and hearing some other people talk about this, I like the idea of just showing them new things, kind of things that they're capable of, because to change the whole way that they play their game and the whole way they view the game, I don't know that I can do that like a 2-hour. I can have an impression and an impact on that. But just exposing them to just different things, different ways to play, different styles, different drills, different ways to dribble the ball, different ways to slow down, and different finishes, even that to me is always a blast. The hard part when you leave is dang, we didn't really get better at one specific thing. But again, I don't even know if that's possible, right? In that one session. Yeah, so I think that's the struggle.
No way is anyone going to get better in a single session.
Right.
And so with that in mind, I went to camps growing up. The ones that frustrated me is when they would harp on specific moves, and they were so difficult that your time is spent frustrated versus actually doing something. Because I think most kids understand
that's interesting,
where to find a ball handling move. It's not even I growing up, I had Pistol Pete videos. I would never went to a camp. Now. I never went to camp and was like, I'd never seen that move before.
Yeah.
And so what's the point of drilling it? Now, maybe if you did it in a warm up and you just said a Simon Says kind of thing. I'm talking about kids who are 14 and younger. That's fun, enjoyable, have some creativity. I think where kids can really learn a lot from is being placed in different situations where they're also not pigeonholed, because they're coming from a place where they are probably pigeonholed into something. And so if a kid comes in I want to learn more about being a point guard or being a big man, whatever the heck they want to learn, that they have the option to do something that they otherwise couldn't get in their hometown.
Got it. Would you do that in a live situation, like a 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3 type of thing? Or would you go through a set of, movements with maybe some, decision-making or freestyle aspect to it for the kids?
It depends on the size of the camp, because the more micro you get, smaller groups, the more detailed you can get just based on the scalability of words. I cannot give words to every single camper if there's 150 campers here.
Right.
You can't the scalability of my thought is too low. If I have 8 campers, the scalability of my voice, my words is much higher. And so
for sure, you
start to think about scalability. And so while I can do micro stuff and maybe bring a camper over and show him a movement with 8 kids, with 15, 30 kids, 40 kids, it might have to be lenient towards, we're going to do some macro movements. Everyone's going to do these movements, and then we're going to play in the grand scale. And I can't give anyone individual super attention. And parents, if you want the individual super attention, you got to pay for the individual super attention. And so this gives you a flavor into it as a coach. Sometimes there's a sales pitch involved, you're the trainer. And so you might give a little bit of your own secret sauce that you do with people as a teaser, because you don't want this to be this generic camp. Because you might want to
Right.
ultimately have someone say, well, what's the value Shane provides beyond just the average trainer? And so maybe one portion towards the end of the camp, you give a lenience towards that micro stuff that you might do. And so a parent might have interest to then purchase that. And so that's the business modeling of it. You don't want to put
Right.
your teaser at the beginning, they'll forget it. You want to
Yeah.
have them wanting more at the end,
At the
especially
end.
it's hard at the beginning because everyone's excited and anxious and whatever. And you just want them to calm down. And at the
Man.
end, remember the parents are typically there to pick them up if they didn't stay the whole day. And so that's a good time to showcase your uniqueness.
I love it, man. I like that answer a lot. And that's kind of where my mind, to be honest with you, has always been set. And hearing again, other people talk about that always helps. But you know what? We need the people to like the video, comment below, because if we can get Max and I could do a camp together, that would be fire. Right? That's what we need, man. Imagine some retired hoopers have knowledge in both fields, be able to just like put something together. I think that would be a blast. That would be really fun.
I'd be about it. Comment
Yeah.
and like. Otherwise, we won't do it. If you
Yeah,
dislike,
we ain't gonna do it.
we're not going to host it.
Yeah, you're gonna ruin kids' potential careers.
All right, you got one more time for one more question here.
Yes. Yep.
You said you had
Okay.
a couple now. I'll let you.
Yep. I
fire
do.
one
I
off.
do. Okay. Golly. Oh, okay. How about can I throw two at you and you can decide?
All right. Well, dealer's choice. I guess
Yeah,
I'm
there
the
you go.
dealer in this case. So player's choice.
Okay. One of them. Best ways to train from being a post to a point guard. So a little bit of like kind of like a positional change in how you would approach that. And then the next one is, where is it? Is shooting efficiency attainable in practice and / a team setting, or does it require a lot of individual work in how you would approach improving team shooting efficiency or just individual shooting efficiency?
So the first one's pretty easy.
Okay.
Play as a point guard. Go find places.
Go play live.
You
Yep.
can play as a point guard. And you might not be good at it, but you need to find places where you can. Playing younger, playing a different group, playing with people who don't know you. That's a great one. They don't know you're not a point guard.
Yeah.
Just say you're a point guard.
Just go try to run it. Yep.
And you'll be surprised at how not difficult that is.
Yeah.
Watch people who are point guards and understand your own deficiencies. So you can work on maybe sprinting with a basketball. If you're not used to dribbling and sprinting with it, looking up to make passes. I think people think if I'm going to be a point guard, that means I'm going to drive and call a pick and roll and throw an overhead pass.
Yeah.
Sometimes a point guard doesn't do much more than just make sure the entry pass is made, and then it's
Right.
basketball.
People on the right spot. Yeah.
Yeah. So just go play basketball and realize how much different it's not than from any other position. And so that's the answer to question number
I like
one.
that one.
And then question number two was, can you become a better shooter if you don't play live, or can you become a shooter by yourself? And this is an interesting area because I think if you drill, a lot of shooters have become very good shooters anecdotally, historically, observationally through practicing by yourself. It's just undeniable. There are a lot of shooters who have shot lots of hoops by themselves. You hear the classic stories of shooting the barn and whatever it might be, being a very good shooter. Now, shooting is different. There's layers within it. Just to shoot lazy shots is one thing. A lot of those people also, you have great imagination. So you're shooting with urgency. You might not have the defenders, but if you imagine well enough, there are defenders there. And so you are practicing the shots that are game-like. And that's the most important thing. It's taking game-like shots. Now, whether the game-like shots occur by yourself or against actual opponents, odds are you can't actually get enough shots against opponents typically. So you're going to have to be by yourself. And finding ways to have some level of accountability. How many shots can I make in a row? Something that applies some level of external pressure. It's not going to be the same as a coach trying to pull you out of a game if you miss it, but it's at least some pressure for accountability to make the shot. If you can do those, I think then we can because the idea is like we want to take a game shot. What is a game shot? That's speed, that's angle of pass. The biggest mistake people make by themselves is not working on spinning the ball from an angle.
Self-passing is so difficult for players, man.
Turn left.
And
catch it. We had a big issue with it. I grew up. My dad wouldn't let me often flip it to myself. You'd flip it and catch like a kick out. And he's like, no one's going to pass you the ball
always
from the
passing
post.
From that angle. Yeah.
Catch it from the side. And so again, it's understanding what a game shot is. Watch people shoot shots in games where the passes
Even
come
little
from.
things like that. Yep. Even
It
things like
makes
that
the
where
world of difference.
for sure. So basically what you're saying is in this guy's question is how do I increase shooting efficiency? It can be done in both. If you're going to do it by yourself, there needs to be some sort of other factors that go in your drills other than just standing, catching, and shooting lazy shots. Could be in a rows. It could be a little bit of variable, like spinning it in different spots or maybe some movement. If you're going to do it in a team setting, the best way to do it is to make it more of like a game type type of drill, right? Driving kick situations, 3-on-3, I think is great for getting realistic shots up, some sort of closeout, something like that.
At the end of the day, if you have a problem and you're trying to figure it out, you have to define the problem. You can't just be like, I want to be a good shooter. Well, what is a good
What does
shooter?
that mean?
Like, what does it actually mean? And I think we do a really horrendous job of this in basketball. I think we just say being a good shooter is someone who makes shots. And you say, well, if that's the case, I can go out there right now and probably make more set shots than some NBA players. But I'm not an NBA quality shooter. So is it just making shots or is it making a certain type of shot? And so you start to actually provide definition. And you could always counterpoint your definition with observation. It's someone who makes shots. Is it? Or is it someone who makes shots running off a pin down at a very high speed like JJ Redick? Because you can clearly understand that my set shot is not the same as shooting a pin down. And so you begin to have definition. And then when you define what you're trying to achieve, you can look at the composite qualities. Oh, a shot involves a catch. It involves a speed. It involves maybe a fadeaway because the defender's closing out. And you can look at those qualities that you might not be as good at and start to practice those. The same way that we mentioned ball handling and stuff. We got to define some things, people. If you want to really understand, like if you're building a rocket ship to go to the moon, you don't just say you got to go fast. There's a certain speed you have to go. There's a certain amount of fuel and load capacity and aerodynamics. There are quantifiable means and methods. In basketball, we're just so lazy. You just like stop. Oh yeah, you know, it's a good defender, good big man. What does that mean? Like, so frustrating because it doesn't help the player. Coaches will say it all the time. Oh, that guy's an athlete. Okay, what does that mean? Oh, you know, he's fast. Okay, with the ball, without it, like, what are you talking about?
Do you feel like you know how, you know, in kind of your world there are tests that you can do to kind of give you data to realize like this is the direction we need to go. Basketball, there's not a lot of that, right? And
well, it's just lazy.
Is it lazy? So I want to come up with something like that because, like, for an example,
science is lazy too. I'll give you that. You say we have these tests and they're so general. How high do you jump? Okay, who cares how high you jump if you can't do that with a ball? Or like there has to be emergence of the skills coach and the strength coach exist to help one purpose and only to help the athlete be better at their sport. And so it always is derived from the sport and specifically what they're trying to accomplish. Someone who comes to me and says, hey, I want to be a better basketball player. Congratulations. Same with everyone else. You know, what's going to make you a better basketball player? And then you begin to define it. You understand lacking physical qualities, lacking technical qualities, and how they can merge together. And there's certain things that I had proposed in the past to certain NBA teams. And, you know, a lifetime ago, I had the opportunity to potentially work in some teams and I turned it down. But you can do clever things. You can do certain things where you look at how fast someone's able to run off of a pin down screen and shoot it. So you can look at the shooting percentage per velocity of movement. So if they're an actively good screen, because when you think about getting open, you either get open because you created space off a down screen because the screen created space, or you physically, by sprinting and misdirecting, created space. So in theory, you can only create so much space with a screen because a screen is a finite effort versus there's theoretically infinite amount of space you could create off of speed. We just ran faster and faster than the opponent. But just running really fast is hard because it's hard to shoot off of it. So a quality to get more open, if the screens aren't better, is to actually shoot at a higher speed, which is why someone like JJ Redick was awesome because he could shoot at a really high pace. And so you look at their ability, their percentage of shooting per velocity, you could essentially look at. And there's going to be a threshold probably at which the movement becomes so fast that they no longer can make it at a stable percentage, let's say 38%. And then you could then theoretically get them better because now they can shoot 10 miles per hour off of a down screen and shoot that. But then people don't like that because the sports science guys starting to talk about skills, and the skills guys don't like it because then they're held objectively to, is he actually getting better? Because right now the whole NBA model is, I hope he get better. Like no one has any definition to anything.
Right.
Sure. And it's almost success by default. And it's very frustrating as someone
or success in spite of your efforts. You might have been working so hard on something and they accidentally got results somewhere else. And you're like, oh, yep, we're going to claim that. And it's like, well, now you're going to do a bunch of work because you thought that was the thing that got you success. Now you're going to repeat that with a bunch of other athletes and it's not going to work out.
Yeah. I think basketball is lazy. I think it's lazy analytics. I think it's all output analytics. They want to look at field goal percentage. They want to look at effective field goal percentage. And they've gone the baseball route. Initially, baseball just had these very advanced metrics, which worked pretty well. But then people started to understand why these advanced metrics occurred. Was it swing velocity, rotational velocity, spin rates on a pitch? And then you start to look at what creates a spin rate. And so like if you want to have a ball that moves a lot, you have a high spin rate, high RPMs. But then you could have they've done things where they do motion tracking on the arm and the deviation of arm slot per pitch. And so if you throw every single pitch out of the same arm slot, it's much harder for the baseball player, the hitter, to differentiate it. And so in the same way that you could begin to look at spin rates on a basketball, if someone has a consistent spin rate on their follow through, depending on whether or not they're getting closed out on, the type of catch they're on, you can start to break down these qualities. But I'm not going to give it all away because, hey, assistant GMs or GMs out there, if you want to give me a ring, I'm happily open.
Man, we gotta come up with our own way to test, right? And then we go do these camps. And
I would not. That is my sauce to get in management. If I found that sauce, I'm holding that as my ultimate goal. I want to be this is a pipe dream, an assistant GM, because I want to help.
No, not a pipe dream, man. That could actually happen with what you know, man. I think that's a good way to look at it, though. Like, because to me, I struggle too. Is like you could come up with challenges like, hey, we're gonna shoot 5 at every spot, and I want you to shoot at least 70%. If you hit 70%, then we can go on the move, right? And that might be like a little baseline test. But do I really know? I have no idea.
I don't want to cut you off. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
It's a management issue, right? So you're a skills trainer, and if you work with an athlete in the professional setting, the GM picked that person. So like, what do you want me to do with him? Like you picked him. Like don't send him to me and then I pick the skills. Like why did you draft him? You obviously had some purpose.
What'd you see in him? Sure.
Quantifiably that you drafted him, and then you had a value map as to how this person can help your team. I'm a resource, and if one of the values is ball handling under pressure with physicality that they can improve their value, then I can work on that. But what happens right now is they basically get a player, which you can think of as a giant data set of information. They hand it to the skills coach and say, hey, tell me how it's useful. And then you're like, well, what do you want with this? You just hand me a giant piece of clay. You want me to make a what kind of marble statue do you want me to make? And so the fact that the GM isn't, and this is, again, I'm not, and maybe organizations are doing this, but from my belief, I don't think it's this defined. There should be someone who sits there with the GM and gives appraisal of every player from a physical, technical, tactical standpoint to understand a value map. So then you can utilize your resources from your skills coach to your strength coach, and then audit the internal process as to how effective you actually are at developing those skills that would improve his value map. And it's from a management of an economy standpoint of like trying to manage value. It's kind of butchered in my opinion.
You know, that's so interesting because I'm a huge Timberwolves fan. I grew up in Minnesota, love everything about the Timberwolves. There's a better, I forget what the analytics say or the number is, but basically our second unit with Anthony Edwards performs better than our first unit of these $25+ million players. And I have to assume that some of the things that we're talking about has a factor in that with the personnel choices that we've made. Not even just this year, but just all time with the Timberwolves. Because I've watched plenty of years of bad basketball there. So that might be a whole nother topic, right? Like even looking at some teams like the Timberwolves, like why does this not work, right? And maybe it's the playing styles, maybe it's the strengths and weaknesses of a lot of the players and things like that. But yeah, that could be a whole nother pod, I think.
Well, we'll save that for another time. We'll wrap it up here.
Yep.
Thank you, Shane, as always. I don't know if we have any
Yeah.
questions.
Some gems in there, man. Ball handling gems are in there, shooting gems. Again, another
Ball
great one.
handling doesn't exist.
That's a hot take. That's a hot take. Watch
I
that pop up on Sports Center or something like that.
wonder what's going to happen with that one. All right, appreciate you guys. Take care and Joe, as always. Peace out.